In the meantime, the backdrop on the overall economy, we got the latest private sector payroll data in today, and it came in okay, 117,000 more private sector jobs. They had been expecting a lot more than that, though, and this is partly a concern because all of the growth was in the services sector industry within the private payroll arena. Now, how this sorts out when we get the big employment report for the month of February, anyone's guess. But let's go to Brian Westbury, the First Trust Advisors chief economist, Hadley, Heath, Manning, the Independent Women's Forum director of policy. The trend is certainly picking up and looking better in the services industry, Brian, but it does seem to be isolated in the private sector, in the services sector. It's not expanding yet to manufacturing, construction. Maybe that will with the low interest rates and the home building going on, but it is a little lopsided. What do you make of that?
Yeah, Neil, I totally agree. And it's all about shutdowns. It's how quickly we can open up the economy. And for us, well, first of all, for the month of February, we're looking for 180,000 jobs, as you said in the big report, the real report. So a little bit better than ADP. But we still have a long way to go to get back to where we were February a year ago. In fact, we think we're going to have 5 to 6 million new jobs created this year, and that's based on easy money, all the stimulus coming in, and also the fact that we believe we're going to get to herd immunity by April. So opening up is the key to getting widespread job gains.
Texas really put the pedal on the metal here, if you think about it, by virtually opening up the whole state to what it was to pre-pandemic levels. Mississippi, very similar. And I'm just wondering, Hadley, you might call that a roll of dice. Some medical experts are telling me they're concerned that they could be, revisiting problems down the road. But what do you make of the economic impact?
Well, I agree with Brian that the best stimulus is ultimately reopening the economy to the point where people can interact with one another, especially in these sectors that are more social and that have dragged due to pandemic restrictions. I understand the concerns, too, about reopening too quickly. On the other hand, I appreciate that throughout the pandemic, many of the decisions that policymakers have had to make deal with local pandemic conditions. Certainly, there's a lot of cause for optimism when it comes to pandemic conditions across the country, seeing the decline in COVID infections, COVID hospitalizations, COVID deaths, the increasing number of Americans who have access to and who've received a vaccine, the seasonality of COVID, which we expect as the warmer months come. We'll see fewer infections because simply we're spending more time outside, or it's easier to social distance in the summer months, or particularly the way the virus behaves in warmer conditions is beneficial to humankind. So I've got a lot of optimism when it comes to, reasons for peeling back these restrictions. And I would say simply as a matter of public policy, we've got to think about what is sustainable over the long run. And I think there is a danger, maybe a miscalculation in some states to keeping public health restrictions too tight for too long. Many Americans already get the sense that our public health restrictions haven't been based purely in science. And so you kind of lend fuel to that fire if you keep the restrictions in place for too long. So I think there's risks on either side here for policymakers if they don't reopen quickly enough or if they reopen too quickly.
Brian, I'm wondering, because Florida's obviously benefited from having this sort of open policy for quite some time and hasn't really hurt its numbers in any way, shape, or form. But having said that, between states that might pick up the baton and start reopening quickly, between the $2 trillion stimulus that's already on the way and all these companies' expansion plans, the likes of so many now building a lot more than they had into their prior plans, United buying more than 24 737 MAX jets. They don't do that. They're not confident of a turnaround in travel plans. So put that all into the blender, and what do you get for this year?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to agree 100% with Hadley about what she said, and then just add one quick point, and that is, if according to the CDC, every person that we found that had COVID, there are 4 other people who probably had it. So if you add that number, positive tests times 4, plus the percent of people, the people that have at least one shot, of the vaccine, those are people that have immunity or technical immunity to COVID. And that number is about 50%. So if you go back a year ago, it was everybody could be infected. Now, 1 out of every 2 people that you might come in contact with can't get infected again. And that's the key here. That's why cases and hospitalizations and deaths are falling. We're getting to herd immunity, and we have to open up. And so then to go to your, directly to your question, Neil, as we open up, first of all, with money growth where it is, M2 is exploding. The Fed has added tons of money to the economy. We're going to do $1.9 trillion of stimulus, whether people think it's right or wrong. It's going to flood into the system. And so when we put all of that together, we're ending up with about a 6% GDP growth for 2021. It is huge, wow. Massive growth, 5-6 million jobs created. And so this year is going to be one of the best economic years we've ever seen in U.S. history.
Not to be fair, it's compared to what was a lousy year before. It's sort of like if I was bracing my parents Hadley, for a report card with all Fs, and I got Ds and Cs, they thought I was a genius, right?
Exactly.
You're an A+ to me, Neil.
There we go. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to discuss more of my report cards. But no,